y'all, let's get started with our next sign. Today we're going to be making our Hello Winter sign. So you should have everything you need in your kit to do your sign. You need to add a couple more tools, and that would include just a pair of scissors and a mini glue gun for your glue stick that you have. We'll use those in just a little bit to work on our bow at the end, okay? So we're going to go ahead and get started. So the first thing you're going to do is we are just going to color the back of your wood board in brown, okay? So when we're doing this, we are just gonna dip that stain and we're gonna kind of wipe it off because it's a little bit thick. Now, my goal on this is I wanna get kind of an even coverage, but also not to get too much on here. I like to be able to see a little bit of the wood grain, but it's okay if yours is thick and you can't, because it's kind of just preference. So if you want it to be thicker, then that's fine. I'm gonna try to put it on here, staying in that same direction the whole time, so I can see that wood grain a little bit, and I'm gonna kind of stretch that paint as far as I can get it to go. And by doing that, not only is it gonna dry faster, but it's also gonna give you that impression of that wood grain coming through, okay? So I just had one little dip. If you have to go any kind of strokes like around the circle or anything, just make sure you go back over it so that you spread out any lines you might have left, okay? On this bottom part, I'm just gonna get this all covered. It's okay if it's a little bit lighter. I know that in my head because I know the bottom part for mine is gonna be blue. Okay, so even if it's a tiny bit streaky, it's okay because it just really adds that natural look, okay? So I'm gonna stretch this out, like I said, as far as I can and just get that good coverage. I literally did the whole thing in just one dip. Okay, you do not have to do the sides because these boards are laser cut, so the sides already have a nice burnt wood effect, which is brown. So for this project, it works out perfectly because it already has that brown look on the edges, okay? So you can just leave that to dry for just a second. I'm gonna go ahead and pop my lid back on my brown. I can set that aside because I'm done with that, and that way I don't spill it, okay? So the next thing we're gonna do when this is totally dry is we are going to divide off the section that we want to paint blue. Now, like I said, I did mine super thin, so mine will be dry here in literally like just a second. So you can see on your, let me set aside my floral for just a second, and watch out for all that glitter that'll come off of here, okay? So you can use this stripe that's on here. And you actually don't need the clear transfer tape. I think it's a little bit easier to apply it without it. So I'm actually gonna peel back, here, let me use my scissors, and I'm gonna cut out the words that say Hello Winter, so I can use those in just a minute. Make sure you keep your little circles that are on there because those circles are what's gonna help keep your words straight, okay? Now, I don't really want the clear transfer tape, so I'm gonna peel that clear transfer tape off. I think it's a little bit easier on this step to apply this straight line just by itself, okay? So I'm gonna I took off the transfer tape, that just goes in the trash. I wanna use that for my words, but not necessarily for the stripe. So now for the stripe, when I put it on here, that's gonna divide where the brown and the blue are gonna start and stop. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna kind of use my little words for reference. So I'm just gonna set them on here kind of towards the edge of the circle. And I'm gonna say, okay, so that's about like where I want my blue to start and for my brown to stop. And I want the line to be right where the dots are, okay? Because the winter word is gonna be blue, but hello is gonna be on the brown. So it kind of gives me an idea that I'm gonna put this stripe a little bit below the halfway point on the circle, okay? So I'm just gonna place that on there nice and straight. Oh, I think I have a crumb behind mine. Oh, it's a piece of glitter from the flower. Okay, so I made sure that's nice and flat on there, and so let me show you. So you can see my stripe is a little bit lower than the halfway point on the circle, okay? So anywhere halfway or below, you're gonna be okay, but I like it just a little bit below the halfway point, okay? So now I'm gonna seal my stencil. So what that means is I wanna put a little bit of brown on this very edge so that if anything leaks under this vinyl, it's gonna leak in brown and not in blue, okay? So I'm literally gonna take this sponge, I'm not gonna dip it again. It's just barely got any paint on it at all. And I'm just gonna kind of scrub, actually, I say that, but mine has nothing left on it because I really scrubbed hard whenever I was doing the doing the circle. So I'm just gonna get a teeny tiny bit more paint, not even dipping in my container, just on my lid. Okay, so now that I have that paint for my lid, I'm just gonna wipe that edge ever so lightly. So you see, I don't need the top edge of this vinyl to be wiped, I just need that bottom edge. And because I want it dry, I'm going back over it with my dry side of my sponge. You don't have to do that, but I'm just kind of, don't want you to have to sit here and just wait for it to dry. So I'll wipe that. That way I know anything that leaked under there leaks in brown, and then I'll get a nice clean crisp line when I put my blue on there, okay? So let that dry. So if you need to, you can fan it or just leave it for 5 minutes and it'll be dry. So that's kind of the benefit of working in such thin coats of paint. So now let's get our blue, and we're gonna dip our blue. When we dip our blue, we just have to wipe it down just so that we kind of get that sponge texture. We just don't want to use a whole ton of paint on there, okay? And then when I put it on here, I'm not gonna wipe this time. This time I'm gonna, what I call spounce, and I call that spouncing because it's kind of like bouncing the sponge, okay? So I'm just gonna kind of go around here and make little pitter patters with this blue. It should go pretty far, so you may have to dip it once more, but probably not. So I'm just gonna go on here all the way, because it's such a small area. You might need to dip it twice, but just be careful when you're right around the edges. So again, I'm dipping and I'm wiping off so I don't have a ton of paint on there, but just be careful around the sides so that you don't get paint down the sides. And you shouldn't, as long as you're doing this lightly. So just kind of light and gingerly, just doing everywhere so I get nice coverage of blue. But we don't want, of course, any blue like running down the side of the sign, okay? So just kind of going around and repeating my coverage, just checking it out like as little bubbles pop to making sure there's not a lot of brown peeping through, okay? All right, so now I've got some good coverage there. I can go ahead and pop my lid back onto my blue. There we go. And set my sponge aside. I'm done with that blue. So now I can just peel off this little vinyl piece, and you can see I got a nice, clean, sharp line on there. All right, now this is trash. So I'm just gonna set it aside. All right, okay, so now we've got our glue gun going, so we should be ready to start on our bow and our floral. So I'm gonna set this aside and let that dry. For the floral, so you can see it comes in one stem, but we actually want it to be 4 different stems. So if you just grab this lower stem and kind of just pull it, you should be able to just pull it right out, okay? So you'll get kind of this like papery scrap stuff, and that's okay, you can just set that aside. So here's one of my stems, and then I kind of just work my way up this branch, and I'm gonna just keep peeling back these branches, and if you pull it real tight, it'll rip through that paper and just give you the branch that's on the wire. Okay, so that's 2. And if you're having a hard time, you can just unroll all this paper that's on here, and it'll help you just undo these pieces. Okay, so there's number 3. And then last, here's number 4. Okay, so we have those. All of this is trash, so I can set that aside. All right, I'm gonna try to clean my area a little bit so I don't have to mess with that with my stencil, okay? All right, let's get started on the ribbon, okay? So you have 3 different pieces of ribbon. You have a short, a medium, and a long. Let's do the medium first. So the medium is gonna be the hanger that goes on the back of the sign. So we're gonna fold it in half long ways, and then we're gonna kind of fold it in like a little V shape down like that, and that's gonna be what goes on the back of the sign to hang it, okay? So once I fold it like this and I have it in the V, I'm just gonna glue those 2 little pieces together on each side. So I'm kind of just putting a little dot there and folding it down so it'll stay in that V shape, okay? So just kind of patting it gently so that I don't burn myself, okay? Now, I see that I want this, like I said, is gonna go on the back of the sign like that. So again, I'm just gonna put a little bit of glue on the bottom of the V part. And that way I can just set my sign down. I'm making sure that I'm nice and straight with my blue line. And just set it right on top of that, okay? So set it there for just a minute to let it dry. Or get cold, I guess, really is how hot glue works, right? Okay, so I've got that on there. so you can see, okay? All right, so next I've got my long piece of ribbon and my short piece of ribbon. So my long piece of ribbon is actually the whole bow. So we're looking for 4 loops. So how we're gonna do that is literally just kind of go back and forth until we get 2 bigger loops and 2 smaller loops, okay? So I'm just gonna start like this. So my ribbon is flat. I'm gonna fold one side in, that's a loop. Fold another side in, that's a loop. So try to get those 2 to be the same, okay? And then I'm gonna fold another side and another side. So you may have some extra and that's totally fine. I just kind of overestimated just to make sure you had enough, okay? So my goal here is to have 4 loops that are the 2 on the top are equivalent and the 2 on the bottom are equivalent. So because I have extra, I could make my bow bigger, but I'm gonna set it on my sign and see how I feel about it. I actually really like this size like that, so I'm just gonna trim off my extra. So I'm leaving a tiny bit like that overlaps, but then I'm just gonna trim that off, okay? So again, you can kind of just see how I have 4 loops on there, almost like a little butterfly, okay? Once I have that, I'm actually gonna just put tiny little dots of glue in between these layers just to help hold these pieces together a little bit, okay? So it doesn't fall apart when I go to squish it all together. Yowzas. Don't do that, okay? Because this is like that natural ribbon, the hot glue will come really good through this, so try not to burn yourself like I just did, okay? So just little dabs of hot glue in between, and if you're afraid of being like me, like a little klutz, then make sure to take your scissors and you could leave them laying on top of your bow like that as it dries, okay? So I'm gonna leave that there. Now your little piece that you have, we're gonna actually fold and we're gonna use that as the center of your bow, okay? It's gonna wrap around like that. So once I get that cooled down just a little bit, I can glue the end of this one onto the back of the bow. And then I'm gonna kind of squish my bow a little bit together, okay? I don't wanna just pull it because I feel like it kind of ends up looking sloppy, but I'm gonna almost like fold it a little bit on itself and then wrap around that piece, okay? Okay, kind of wrap around that piece like that. So you'll be able to, because this is like a wired bow, so again, I have a little bit of extra, so I'm gonna cut the tail off except for what's overlapping. And that way I can just put a little bit of hot glue in there. And I'm gonna put that on there. So like I said, because this is a wired bow, you'll be able to kind of finagle it around just a little bit to make the bow parts look better. Okay, so you'll be able to get those loops to look really good. And then that center piece like that, okay? So literally we're just taking that big old piece, going back and forth to get those 4 loops. Try not to burn yourself like I did. I mean, missing that skin on my thumb today. And glue that together and then wrap it around with the center piece, okay? And then actually that extra piece we can use for our tails of our bow, okay? So the way I did the tails of the bow is actually similar to the way that I did the door hanger part. So I'm actually gonna use this little extra. Sorry, I guess I thought it was extra, but it must not be. So let's do one thing real quick. So let's cut the little triangle that we need to cut out of the ends of both of these, okay? So the way I do that is I fold it in half, and then when I fold it in half, I'm gonna cut off the fold, okay? So the fold is the part that does not have the wire, okay? So I'm gonna cut off the fold at a 45-degree angle. So when I do that, I end up with a little tail like that, okay? So again, I'm gonna do the same thing on this side, fold it, cut off the 45-degree angle of the side that does not have the wire, okay, so you end up with that. Now, the way I did the tail on this one is just like I did the door hanger part. I actually folded it in half, and then I folded it like a little V like this, okay? So I am actually gonna just kind of see where I want that. I think it's gonna be a little bit easier at this point if we go ahead and put on the letters. So now that I have my little tails and my bow, I'm gonna set those aside. And I'm gonna grab my stencil. So I have my stencil that says Hello Winter. And all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna scrape this real good. I kind of like to cut it around my letters to make sure I don't have a lot of this extra stuff if you have it on there. Okay, so now I have my letters. I've got the clear transfer tape on the front of the letters. I wanna scrape it where that clear transfer tape picks up the letters and transfers it onto my board. So I'm just gonna scrape it real good, and I need to pick everything up, okay? So I'm gonna peel up this clear, and I wanna pick up everything on there, okay? So I'm just watching and making sure that it picks up every letter, okay? Including those 2 dots. Now, if it's not picking up, or if you're having a hard time, scrape it again, or just make sure you pinch your stencil on both sides and just kind of try to finagle it so you can get all these letters up perfectly just in one piece, okay? So I have it all up on my little transfer tape, and now I'm going to apply it. And I'm going to try to go as close as I can to the edge, to the right border of my circle. And so you'll see that these circles, the little 2 dots that are on there, they're actually there to help you put these words on there straight. So if you center those 2 dots on your line, then your lettering is going to be straight. So it's a little bit hard because they're not exactly like right angle letters. And you've got the cursive, and you've got kind of like funky uppercase font. So it's hard to tell when they're straight, but those 2 circles will help you straighten out your stencil, okay? So put those right on your line, and then we're gonna scrape it down really good. And now our goal is to get everything to stick to the wood, okay? So we're scraping this all down, and since everything is nice and dry, it should stick pretty good. I'm gonna go start peeling at a diagonal. All right, everything seems to be sticking really good so far, but if you ever have a letter that doesn't want to stick, then just make sure you're following closely with your hand and you push those letters down to make sure that they stick, okay? Now, I don't need those circles anymore because those circles were just to help me put my letters on. So I'm gonna just go ahead and use my fingernail, and I'm just gonna pop those little circles off, okay? Because those are not part of my finished project. All right, so let me pop those little circles off. And there you go, you have your letters on. Now it's just time to glue everything together. Okay, so first step is I'm gonna glue on the little tails. So I have this little piece like this. I'm gonna fold it in half and then fold it in my V shape, okay? So put a little dot of hot glue in between to hold the 2 pieces together, and a little bit of hot glue on the back to put it on this sign, okay? So I can kind of see, by putting it on here, I can kind of tell how far I want the loops to hang down so that they're not touching my letters, okay? So you can see that's kind of what that one looks like. So I just have my little V on there, just my little tails for my bow. All right, next thing I'm gonna do is place my, my floral pieces, okay? So these are kind of long wires, so if you have wire clippers and you wanna clip them down, you could do that. I just folded mine in half, so that's kind of another option, or kind of wrap it around itself like that, just to kind of make those shorter than they were. So let me do that, and then I'm gonna lay them kind of where I want them, okay? So I'm just gonna, like I said, fold mine down, fold it in half, and kind of just press it down. Oh, good. That's what I did on this sample, so I kind of wanted to show you that. So you didn't have to have wire clippers, but if you have them and you want to use them, that's totally fine too, okay? You could cut those down to size. So next one, fold it down, lay it where I want it. You can kind of spread these out a little bit. If you have anything stuck in them, you can pull that out. All right, so I kind of get an idea of how they're gonna look on this sign. I can kind of move them around and see where I want that floral to go, okay? So you can flip them, do whatever. So you want them to be right about at the top, meeting right about at the top of that, of the tail V, because that's where our bow is gonna sit, okay? So once I decide, okay, I really like them about like here, I wanted to just leave them still and not lift them up and re-glue them down. So really what I did is I just put a ton of hot glue like right on top of where they are, so that I made sure it kind of seeped down there underneath where they were. That way some is on the board and some is all around these stems, okay? And then once I did that, I just used my bow to kind of push everything down. So I put my bow on there, and I'm just gonna push, 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 and kind of get some pressure. That's gonna help get all that hot glue to stick to the board, and it's gonna get our bow to stick to the board, okay? So really right now I just have to wait like a minute to see. So you still have a little bit of time if you wanna kind of move around these little winter stems a little bit. You'll be able to get a little bit of movement while they dry, okay? But for the most part, you can kind of see what your final product is gonna look like. right? So be careful with all that glitter. It kind of falls off a little bit while you're working on it, but once you're done and not messing with it, it should be good. All right, so I'm gonna kind of check on that. And mine is looking good. If you need to add a tiny bit more hot glue on the back to hold it together, you can. But looks like mine is nice and good and dry, and there you go. You have your beautiful winter door hanger that you can decorate with. One more thing that I thought about was if you wanted to extend this and you didn't want to change it, if it matches like your house or something, you could even take off the word winter eventually, and you could just make it say hello. But if not, then you have this beautiful sign and you can use it year after year, so just store it, just like you would like a wreath, and you can have it out for December, January, February. So I hope you enjoy it, and I would love to see pictures of your beautiful project, and especially once you have it displayed. Thank you again for crafting with the Joyful Table, and we'll see you next month.